Good morning, everyone. My name is Betsy Nolen. I graduated from University of Maryland in May 2015 with my Master of Architecture and currently work at Buyer Blender Bell in DC. And this process was also fantastically aided by the help of Maddie Simon in the audience there. Definitely couldn't have done it without her. I'd like to start with a story. On July 18th, 2009, I woke up with a partially dead retina. I woke up not being able to see out of part of my left eye with no reason or identifiable cause. I wasn't sure if I was going to keep my vision, and I had no security in how to navigate life without it. It was terrifying. The doctors couldn't tell me anything. And essentially, I was equating the loss of my vision to death. Now, sight, as Johanni Palaasma says, or on the topic of sight, is that the image we usually think of as purely visual and a fixed image, or fixed picture, but in reality, all of your senses are so integrated into that image that it's not only visual, that you have all of these other senses combined. And now the world of the blind tends to delve into the intersensory, and it's almost as if they receive the world in one single fundamental sense. That there's something almost beautiful about it in a way, that sight, with its quick, flickering quality, distracts us from these other aspects of life. So I'd like to inform you about the methodology that I used for this process as an architecture student. First, I looked into how vision works. Then I interviewed people across the visual spectrum. So sighted, blind, and sighted people who collaborate with the blind. And then I analyzed precedents to come up with a set of design principles in multisensory design. So there is a potential to carry this forward with the collaboration of neuroscientists. So if you're at all intrigued by this, please hunt me down afterwards and let's talk. When looking at blindness, I discovered this degree of all the degrees of blindness that originally, as I thought, that when someone went blind, they didn't see a thing, which is not true. That there are so many degrees that legal blindness is actually much different than I thought it was. And when talking to people, Daniel Pink says that good design begins with empathy. You can't really understand your audience until you speak with them, put yourself in their shoes, and imagine yourself as them. So speaking with sighted people about the blind community, I discovered that there's this general lack of knowledge about a day in the life, so to speak. A lot of people think that what I've coined the daredevil effect, which is when you go blind, all of your other senses essentially step up to the plate and immediately are more powerful, which is not true, that you in fact have to train your other senses to account for the loss in one. When I spoke to sighted collaborators, these were teachers at the Maryland School for the Blind, they gave me a lot of insight into working with blind students on a daily basis, and that really these kids, they had no boundaries at all. They did not perceive edges. They moved around space like normal people with sight. And that these teachers pushed me to discover what a space would look like without vision. And as I talked to some people at the National Federation of the Blind, who are blind, I was pushed to think about this process not as designing for the blind, because their worry was that I would be designing something almost that would handicap people, that I would be designing something for the blind when in fact everybody needs multisensory design. And while looking at precedents, I came up with a system to kind of categorize different elements, different architectural elements, discover what they were doing well, what they were not. And these elements were, I'm sorry that it's cut off at the side, but space, edge, path, transition, and threshold. So in the first, space, you'll see in this matrix that along the top, you'll have the name of the building, a plan, and then along the side, you'll see visual, acoustic, and tactile. So in each square of the matrix is that particular space's response, visually, acoustically, and tactile. So space in general is kind of think the overall room, and a lot of these tended to be easy to move around, and there wasn't a specific direction in them. When we came to the edges of these spaces, there tended to be a change in color contrast or material contrast. And acoustics, sometimes you would have something over top of you, not always. And a path through that space or leading to that space sometimes tended to have a marker on the wall that you could feel, something underneath your feet that would guide you in a direction, and sometimes colors that would let you know where along the path different spaces were. And as you move off of the path, or you're moving along the path, you come up to a transition point. So a point along the path where something changes in the acoustic or the tactile and directs you into another space. And that threshold point is the point at which you change, you move from the transition into that next space. So oftentimes that was a change in your side to side, whereas the transition would change in the above plane. You can see in these two on the left, that's the same space. And they worked a lot with the use of planes and shifting them to direct people into certain spaces. From these were developed design principles in response to each of the precedents. So space was really the most straightforward one. A non-directional floor material, and really the acoustic quality in the space could be reflective of what is happening in the space. And on the edge of space, this little red highlighted piece would be maybe a change in the floor pattern, a change in the color, to notify people that they were approaching the edge of space, and there's a wall there. Please don't run into it. If there is a path, there would be a change in the acoustic overhead. So something that made people feel slightly more enclosed, so they would know if they were veering off of that path into space. And there would also be a change in the material underneath, maybe something that's more directional, so someone with a sight cane walking along that path could pick up that texture and follow it. At that transition point, there would be yet another change in the acoustic quality and another change in the tactile, in that material, to let those people know that there is a change, there is a decision-making point along a path that could direct them into space. Now, threshold, abstractly in this, is really just seen as that almost a door. So that side-to-side change in the acoustic quality and that moment at which you move into the next space. So these were applied to a building that I designed. It's a hypothetical building on Baltimore's waterfront. And it's essentially a creative collab where both blind and sighted people would come to build things together and be together and learn together. So this image here is almost what I've called the spine of the building, or that corridor, that main space where from this space you access the maker space and the collaboration space. So you would walk along, feel that change underneath your feet. If the panel is out in the hallway, that change in acoustic notifies you that the doors are open and that classroom is open for use. If the panel has been moved inside, it also acts as an absorption quality to absorb the noise in the room, and then notifies people walking along the corridor that that room is no longer open to them. And so this, through the process of iterative design, was refined so that each of the qualities was reflected. And so this next slide, it's a short video of a sound rendering that I've done. So we have a short amount of time left, but you can either open your eyes or close your eyes or do a mix. Put your imagination to work or just watch it, whatever you feel. You'll walk from the waterfront and into the building, through the spine, and into one of the classrooms. Oh, there's no audio? Why is there no audio? Oops. Does anyone know? Well, I don't know what to do. So yeah, that's like a smart idea. So you would hear the sounds of the wood underneath your feet, almost the sound of the water underneath it, running. As you approach the doors to the building, you would hear an acoustic marker of water running to let you know that that vestibule is coming. Oh. Oh, man. No. Yeah, the volume is up. All right. All right, here we go. Our dependency upon vision is crippling our other senses. Architecture is not just a sighted activity. We inhabit a space with our whole being. Thus, the impact of architecture on the human experience is too deeply existentially rooted to to be approached solely as an element of visual design. Thank you.
In the back.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. As you were building up the ideas around the design, I was thinking that biophilic design or biomimic design might be a source of furthering this concept. If we're in a forest, what's above us changes at the same time that's what's below us. And so I'm wondering if there's other ways that you're looking to push this thinking next, either biophilically or in other research pursuits.
That's a really good point. One thing that has come up is adding more factors into the design principles, one being thermal, because I believe that strongly affects how we move through space. So that's another good one is biophilic. Thank you.